there is a really good chance you were sacrificing the big picture or the long term for a short term gain. So one of my principles, or like kind of golden rules that I navigate by personally and teach is don't make long-term decisions based on a short-term problem. We do this all the time. We give up our freedom in the long term for short-term gain. We give up our relationships and stability for short-term gain. We give up our health for short-term gain. We don't realize what we're doing. The reason why most people are trapped in the rat race and never really get free from their own behavioral patterns is because they're stuck in patterns of short-term thinking. And so they get stuck because they're not solving for something more than just the moment. And if you're happy in the moment constantly and your life is the way you want it to be, then I would say keep doing it. Usually when I get asked questions, instead of trying to contend that something is better than the other, I just ask, like, are you happy with the result you're getting? And most people are like, no, I'm not happy with the result I'm getting. I'm always stressed out. I'm anxious. I feel like I never get ahead. And some of that's programming that can become patternistic to where even when you are doing really well, you still feel like you're not. But the easiest way to look at this is back test your life. When you look at the times in your life where you made decisions you wish you could take back. I'm not a big fan of regret. I think everything has a lesson in it. But let's just say those moments where you wish you could take them back. There is a really good chance you were sacrificing the big picture or the long term for a short term gain. So one of my principles, or like kind of golden rules that I navigate by personally and teach is don't make long-term decisions based on a short-term problem. We do this all the time. We give up our freedom in the long term for short-term gain. We give up our relationships and stability for short-term gain. We give up our health for short-term gain. We don't realize what we're doing. So I think just getting more conscious about the residual effects. So for instance, if you buy beers or even travel on a credit card, now there are ways to game the system here, but that isn't what most people are doing, so be clear. But let's say you buy food, drink, and travel on a credit card. Okay, well, I like points and I like miles. There's ways to use that. That's not what I'm talking about. But you go into debt $10,000. It's surprising how many people under the age of 25 think that $10,000 credit card is $10,000 of money. It's not money, it's debt. But if you look at it like money, it explains why you spend it like you think it's money. Not only are you mortgaging your long-term future with a 24% interest rate, you're doing it with things that you won't likely remember in a short amount of, there's no upside to it. I'm not talking about creating beautiful experiences with the people you love. I massively advocate for that. But let's be honest, that's not usually what's going on with consumer debt. Right? And we go into debt for things that we forget about, that aren't important to us anymore past the moment, and then we're still residually paying the effect of it at 24%. Now think about it. Every liability that you have is somebody else's asset. If I came to you right now and said, hey, I have an investment vehicle that's going to pay you 24%, would you be into that? Yeah, you'd be into that. Who wouldn't be into that? Well, our every liability is somebody else's asset. So look at that. Your liability is that credit card. Somebody else's asset is the 24% APR that you're paying on that. That's wild. Right? So you're leasing your future or mortgaging your future for something that you may or may not even remember weeks later. So to me, that's the tragedy. And so there's lots of scenarios in our life where we're sacrificing the long term for the short term. And we do this as humans, right? The human race is doing this. We're talking about whatever you think of climate change or global warming. It's clear with 8 billion humans on Earth, we have a responsibility to steward the Earth well. Right? So whatever your story is, forget it. Just recognize we have a responsibility to steward the natural resources of Earth well. And I don't think anybody is still arguing that humans do not have a material impact, a measurable impact on the world. You forget all the agenda. I'm not a fan of all the agenda either, right? And the manipulation and all the bullshit that goes into that. But just recognize we have a responsibility to steward our planet well. If we are solving for the short term in unsustainable ways, in a way that is impacting generations that go after us, that's a problem. So a lot of the wealthiest, powerful people in the world got there because they thought in terms of generations. Generationally, they'll be there long after lots of humans have passed and gone because they're thinking differently. In Eastern culture, it's not uncommon to see that where they're, and I remember hearing a story about river rocks, or they were, I believe it was in Japan, but one of the cultures they were putting, back in the day, they were putting river rocks in the river to flatten them for building. Well, that process would take decades to get there. And they were thinking in terms of decades, in terms of centuries. Like, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for 2 or 3 generations down the road. That's a different way of looking at the world. I think things tend to get a lot better when we think in terms of, the long now, right? Not just the short, like in the immediate grasp of what do I want now. So that's kind of what I think. When you look at, the marshmallow test, you can Google it if you want. I think it was a Stanford study, the marshmallow test, that showed that those who were able to sustain or push off short-term gratification for long-term payoff tended to do better in society. That's a powerful study, and you can just Google it. Just Google marshmallow test, and I think it'll come right up. But you'll see this, like as a character trait, successful people tend to be able to deny short-term pressure and short-term pleasure for long-term gain.